Hey everyone, welcome to today's Explainer. We're actually going to completely skip the usual intro today and dive straight into a frozen mystery at the literal ends of the Earth. You know, in a world where we can instantly stream a movie or download endless gigabytes of data, we almost never stop to ask ourselves, where are the physical limits of open knowledge? Like, how far into the absolute most extreme corners of our planet can a free, simple university lecture actually travel? And, well, what happens when it gets there? Take MIT professor David Kaiser, for example. He teaches a seriously complex physics course, and he got this completely unexpected email. It turned out his lectures weren't just playing in cozy dorm rooms or local coffee shops. They were actively reaching some of the most profoundly isolated researchers on the planet. We're talking about people who are entirely cut off from the rest of human civilization for months on end, and hearing from them was just the ultimate payoff for him. So let's really dive into this explainer and look at the sheer scale of this phenomenon. We're going to explore how open source platforms, specifically MIT OpenCourseWare and IBM's Qiskit, are radically democratizing the world's most advanced tools. It's a massive paradigm shift. The most elite educational materials and the most cutting-edge quantum computing infrastructure are no longer locked away behind ivy-covered gates or billion-dollar corporate labs. They're just out there in the wild, available to literally anyone with a Wi-Fi connection. Let's start with part one: knowledge without borders and education at the ends of the Earth. So our journey starts down in Antarctica, where we meet a researcher named John Della Costa. Now, it's one thing to say knowledge is globally accessible, right? But it's a whole different ballgame to see it put to use in an environment that is just aggressively hostile to human life. John works on the BICEP project at the South Pole, using radio telescopes to study the cosmic microwave background. Basically, he's looking at the oldest light in the universe to find evidence for cosmic inflation. But doing this kind of groundbreaking research takes way more than just scientific brilliance. The brutal cold and the endless darkness take a massive toll, meaning finding ways to stay intellectually and socially engaged isn't just a hobby, it's honestly a matter of survival. To really put this extreme isolation into perspective, you have to understand that after mid-February, planes simply cannot fly into the South Pole Station. It's just too cold. The fuel would literally freeze in the engines. Now, Della Costa had discovered MIT OpenCourseWare back during the pandemic, and he knew this complete lockdown was coming, so right before the station completely sealed off from February all the way to late October, he downloaded a bunch of advanced physics courses, including MIT's Physics in the 20th Century, just to make sure he had some high-level intellectual fuel to survive that incredibly long, dark winter. But here's the absolute coolest part of this whole story. These downloaded lectures didn't just become background noise on a solitary laptop, they actually built a community. John launched what he called Physics Fridays to engage the 45-person Winter Over crew. And they were just passively sitting there watching videos. They actually started doing real physics experiments in the dark. They ran the famous double slit experiment, and they even planned out a cloud chamber to observe cosmic rays. Having free access to this course completely transformed a group of isolated people into an active, collaborative academic cohort. They even pulled off a live remote colloquium with the MIT professor himself over Zoom. Moving on to part two, empowering the independent learner and real-world impact in Peru. Okay, so let's travel all the way from the frozen expanses of the South Pole to the bustling streets of Lima, Peru, and follow the journey of a recent high school grad named Adrian Pastor. Adrian was really motivated by his grandmother's struggle with muscle weakness, plus his own interest in sports performance, so he decided he wanted to build an electromyography, or EMG, tool. Now, step one was pretty rough. He built a prototype on a breadboard, but the signal was just a total mess. The waveforms would wobble, they'd drift, and any tiny shift in posture would flood the thing with noise. But then came step two. He turned to free MIT OpenCourseWare classes on circuits, electronics, and biomedical signal processing. And that led to step three, the big breakthrough. Using that world-class knowledge, Adrian systematically eliminated the electrical interference. He literally turned a wobbly, noisy experiment into a stable, reliable medical device to help the elderly. Adrian summed it up perfectly. He said, after OpenCourseWare, the EMG stopped feeling like a fragile demo and started feeling like a tool. I just love that. It perfectly captures what true open access is all about. These free lecture notes didn't just sit in some forgotten folder on his hard drive. They actually empowered an independent high schooler to troubleshoot some really complex electrical interference and build real, tangible hardware that people can actually trust. It perfectly bridged the gap between just having empathy for a medical issue and having the technical chops to actually go out and solve it. And there are so many stories like this. Take 19-year-old Frisia Gall, for instance. She was a seasonal traveler because her parents ran a skiing company, which meant she was constantly moving and changing schools every 6 months. As you can imagine, traditional classrooms just couldn't keep up with that kind of nomadic lifestyle. But she tapped into those exact same MIT resources to push right past the limits of her constantly shifting physical environment. By accessing all this open knowledge, she picked up the hardcore problem-solving skills she needed to innovate and actually build her own virtual reality prototype. Which brings us to part 3, shaping the next 25 years and the breadth of open knowledge. To really wrap our heads around the massive scale of this democratization, we have to look at the sheer diversity of what's out there. MIT OpenCourseWare alone spans over 2,500 courses. We're talking about everything from the academic study of comedy to the chemistry of sports, all the way up to incredibly intense graduate-level stuff like the quantum theory of radiation interactions. It genuinely gives any motivated student, no matter what their background is or where they happen to live, a direct path to learn at a deeply serious level across wildly different subjects. The entire curriculum of one of the world's absolute best institutes is just sitting there, completely free, waiting to be explored. Now, this is where we hit a really vital pivot point in our explainer. On one hand, we have open education, platforms like MIT OCW that essentially open source the classroom, making it possible for anyone to learn the theory. But what happens after you've learned it? That's where open infrastructure comes into play. Once you have the knowledge, tools like IBM's Qiskit are stepping in to open source the actual laboratory. They allow you to execute what you've learned on real world-class technology. Let's jump into part 4, programming the quantum future and the open source quantum lab. So we are officially leveling up from just consuming advanced knowledge to actually executing complex programs on the literal computers of tomorrow. Let's break down what we're talking about here. Qiskit is an open source software development kit. It's maintained by IBM Quantum and a massive, super enthusiastic community. And this software stack allows absolutely anyone with an internet connection to tap right into cutting-edge quantum computers. You aren't just running cute little simulations on your laptop anymore. Qiskit lets you work at the level of extended quantum circuits and primitives. It essentially hands you the keys to infrastructure that, honestly, just a few years ago would have been strictly classified or locked away in a top-secret corporate lab. I mean, 7,600. That is a massive number, and it represents the thousands of stars on just the main Qiskit GitHub repository alone. If you know the open source world, you know that stars are the ultimate metric of popularity and utility. So this proves we aren't just talking about some niche, abandoned side project. This is an immense, highly active, and deeply engaged global community of developers who are literally right now collectively writing the software for the quantum future. And that leads us to part 5, an ecosystem of innovation and expanding the quantum stack. Now, it's important to realize that Qiskit isn't just one giant monolithic piece of software. The ecosystem is actually incredibly vast and highly specialized. For instance, if you want to work on complex particle physics, well, there's a repository for that called Qiskit Fermions. Or if you need to optimize how quantum circuits are processed, there's Qiskit Out-on Cutting to help reduce their width and depth. There's an entire bespoke ecosystem here, completely tailored for highly specific, wildly advanced computations. And the best part? It's all completely open for you to download, modify, and contribute to. And what makes this new frontier so incredibly accessible is the actual programming language being used to build it. Python, which is arguably the most popular and beginner-friendly language in the world, totally leads the charge here. But the ecosystem also supports Rust for high performance, Jupyter Notebooks for research, and even TypeScript and C++. The major takeaway here is that the quantum future isn't being built in some obscure, impossible-to-learn machine code. It's being built collaboratively using the world's most accessible and widely understood programming languages. Finally, let's look at part 6, your turn to build and dissolving the boundaries of innovation. As we step back and look at the big picture here, let's just recap the incredible shifts we've mapped out today. Institutional boundaries, completely shattered by open education. The computational limits of classical machines being bypassed right now by open-source quantum software. We've got high schoolers like Adrian in Peru engineering stable medical devices right in their bedrooms. We've got isolated researchers like John at the South Pole fighting the endless dark by testing cosmic theories. And we have an army of global developers shaping the very future of computing together on GitHub. It is just abundantly clear that the barrier to entry for world-changing innovation has fundamentally shifted. It's no longer about where are you located and who are your connections. The only question left is, how curious are you? I want to leave you all with one final provocative thought. If a lack of access was ever an excuse, well, that excuse is officially gone. The world's finest educational materials and the most powerful quantum computing infrastructure ever created are sitting right there, entirely free, just waiting for a motivated mind. So the question isn't whether the tools exist anymore. The real question is, what are you going to build with them? The tools are out there waiting for you, so go explore. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.